Welcome back, everyone, to another special live episode of the Higher Geek Podcast, recorded live here at the eduWeb Summit in Portland, Maine. I'm here with Sean Fitzpatrick from Overit, and we're talking about AI's impacts on SEO. So it's something that I have definitely started to get very curious about. So I'm excited to talk about it with you, kind of talk about, you kind of have a unique journey as well into your role. But so if you want to introduce yourself briefly, kind of who you are, what you do, and then your organization, and then we'll get on to the AI and SEO kind of conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Dustin, and hi, everybody out there. Sean Fitzpatrick, Chief Marketing Officer with Overit. We're a marketing shop out of New York State. And as far as my journey, I just spent the last 10 years on the institutional side in higher ed. So leading marketing at the University of New England and at Unity Environmental University. And now I'm on board with Overit. And I'm really enjoying being on the agency side, but I really love working with higher ed clients because I can empathize so much and I can help them make the clearance they need to make and make the cases that they need to make. So it's really nice to be working at an agency, but still in the higher ed space.
Yeah, well, I always appreciate folks like yourself that get to a point and, some people, it's kind of the fork in the road, I guess, but like having an opportunity and embracing it to then kind of work with yourself at a bunch of other, institutions where it's like, yeah, I know kind of how everything works and all the, challenges and all that. But you can kind of empathize in such a unique and different way. And I think, this moment, thankfully, like for a number of reasons, but like we're at a point where I think there's just with like the vendors and partners or whatever else, like less so of a sort of like antagonistic like attitude at higher institutions. Like they know that they need good partners to do the work that they need to, whether it's just sort of expanding their capacity or bringing in innovative and new ideas. And then when you have folks that are sort of now, there's like just so much more fluidity of like, folks from institutions working at agencies and then going back, or like there's just more sort of like a kind of fluidity in the ecosystem. So it is just like, we're all on the same team and we know that we need like help. So like, I don't know, that just sort of came to my mind. It was sort of like, you are kind of, I think, indicative of just a broader trend of just the more sort of kind of openness to bringing in like partners, to an institution to really create like deep partnerships that are really empowering them to reach the goals that they want to in, in a number of different areas. But,
absolutely. And the fact is, everybody who's here, every university, every college that here has a strong marketing and communications team, but they might not have every role just right. They might have a mid-level person in a role. They might have an empty FTE, things like that, right? So we're able to come in and say, like, we don't need to step on your toes. We can just communicate about where do you need the discipline expertise? Where do you need the consulting? And so having been in their shoes, better able to do it, so yeah.
So, we're here at eduWeb. We're kind of halfway through day 2, kind of nearing the end. So how has eduWeb been for you so far? Any interesting conversations or sessions or things that you've gone to? I know you presented as well. We can talk about that. But just anything interesting that you've kind of seen or heard.
Well, just one really cute story is that. So I saw a colleague from the University of New England who grew up in Guam, right? And then the University of Guam is here. And I met those guys. And I just said, oh, you have to meet Rika, who's also from Guam. And I introduced them, and it turns out that they went to the same high school. So these guys came halfway around the world, and then you meet somebody from the hometown. So that's kind of cute. So there are people from all over the place. And what I've experienced in these sessions is I feel like they're really well curated for the doers, So I've been going to a lot of conferences on the agency side, and sometimes the sessions are more in the realm of, isn't this interesting? Or kind of leadership ideas. These sessions have been deep data about what drives students or, which ad converts the most. And I've been talking to the director of marketing level people here, and they are really enjoying that deep data. So for me, I think this conference is really right sized for those doers. Yeah. And hats off to the folks who've curated.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, like there's so many different events, and it's always just great to be in community, and generally in some of those things like you mentioned. But
have people who are in your shoes at another
right,
institution.
But I think if you know better of like, okay, well, this event kind of has more of this, less of that. Like you can kind of like be strategic about like, where am I going when to get, the problems I need to solve kind of addressed, or whatever else, or if I'm open to shopping for one thing or another. Like some have bigger expo floors than others or whatever, so I think just honoring kind of where it's like, oh, this event is like a lot of the doers and like they're getting into really kind of, tactical things informed by trends and data.
And they're going to get home next week, or maybe hopefully they'll take a vacation in Maine
Right.
and then get home and they'll have things that they can practice. So it's nice.
Well, to kind of tee up the like AI and SEO kind of conversation, if you want to tell me more about your session, kind of what you talk about there, and then we'll just kind of expand upon that for kind of our conversation.
So it's a lightning session tomorrow morning. It's 30 minutes. And so it's called SEO Now. How to have your website show up in AI search. And so I worked with 2 SEOs at Overit because we're getting all of these requests from clients about making sure that they show up in ChatGPT. So we actually just did a webinar last week that's going to be on our podcast where we've just immersed ourselves in this, and we've done several of these audits for clients on AI SEO and bringing it to market. So I'm going to be sharing these 5 top things people can do. And the idea is, it really is quite similar, has many overlaps with traditional SEO. It's really about where you focus your attention. There is some technical secret sauce, mostly in the schema, the structured data, but it's also about focusing on content, that has different specific contours to help you succeed for the old school search as well as for new school search.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting to me because I think it. There's like folks here that kind of, obviously are coming at this work from a variety of different angles, but like that, to me, like it's still just reinforcing that like your website is such a like crucial part of your like digital infrastructure, because that's where like any of these like tools are sort of looking for the information. So if you're, like the idea of, for SEO, it's like, well, you just need to kind of, cater to that to, be bringing some intentionality to your strategy. And I guess just a lot swirling in my head too, but like the idea of like with any of this, because sometimes people might say it's like, oh, we're not doing SEO, we're not doing it. It's like, well, you are, even if you aren't, because like people are searching for this and they see you or they don't see you in like relevant searches or whatever. So I think like it's such an interesting moment of like kind of, to me, of like it's still getting kind of like back to basics, or trying to kind of distill something that feels sort of abstract or ambiguous or very new and kind of whatever else. And like folks like yourself, I guess, that are really kind of wholeheartedly embracing sort of this like teaching moment, I guess, of kind of really bringing people in versus it being like, I don't know, sometimes like when things like this change, like it's kind of just like well, you either know or you don't or whatever. And it's kind of like, it's on you to figure it out. It's like, like, so I guess that idea of like, I don't know how you're sort of approaching these kind of conversations of like, how folks, should be adapting their strategy to embrace AI as part of their SEO sort of, approach and everything. But like, I don't know, because I guess it is like, it's very new. So I think I guess I want to say this right, like, how are you approaching these conversations? I guess like the sort of like, again, that teaching moment, what is that like for you, I guess, to kind of bring people in to kind of just demystify all of this?
So it's funny because a lot of the conversations people are having about AI SEO now are about how are we going to incrementally adapt what we're already doing to meet our needs for the fall, But so what we try to do at first is just pull back. There are futurists who are talking about in, say, 10 years, websites won't be for human visitors anymore, possibly, right? There are folks who say that websites are really going to be these data storage facilities for these AI agents to go and get information on an organization. So like when you think about where things are going, it can just kind of help you kind of free up, like things are changing a lot now. Nobody quite knows where they're going, but we can start from where we are. And so I think the thing that I like about it is I try to find the joy in it for everybody that we're talking to, right? And so like traditional SEOs like AI SEO because it's so similar, right? And they get to say like, I know this stuff, right? Because you're still presenting your content for the algorithms and also for human to consume. And now it just has this little extra layer where you're presenting it for the answer engines as well. Then the old school marketers like it. And that's me. I love content and I love branding because these synthesizing AI tools are out there looking way beyond the website, right? So part of what we're saying is your website needs to be tight, but you also need to be syndicating your content. Every piece of content, you got to duplicate it, get it on all the socials, on YouTube, and then you got to do PR. If you get on trade publication PR, that's back, right? So, and even just brand marketing. So all of those good old-fashioned, fun, creative tools expand your footprint, and that expands or increases rather your authority, which the AI engines love. So we try to approach it from the joy of marketing, right? There's a lot in it for everybody, and it's just a time to be busy instead of wringing our hands.
That's a great way to put it. I appreciate that, because I think that, I guess, is what I was sort of like processing out loud and trying to search for, is just sort of like, how do you kind of bring someone to water and get them to kind of like, engage in the process of, learning all this. And certainly part of it's like building upon prior learning, finding the joy and the fun in it. And then also like that idea of how it sort of like reinforces like fundamentals or something. Because I think there could be this tendency where it's like, okay, cool. It's like, I can just completely take my hand off the wheel or whatever else. It's like, nope, you just really need to get back to basics and do those things. And that even being where, you're embracing some familiarity in this age that feels very, again, like abstract, ambiguous and whatever. So I think that's just like a great kind of refreshing approach to this, where I'm sure, again, there's so many people are like so intimidated by all this stuff, but that idea of like, folks like yourself just embracing sort of the opportunity that this is as like a teaching moment, and just being the person who's sort of like, all right, guys, like we got to get back to basics, and just being like, okay, all right, well,
and people have been enjoying, I've been calling them hacks, but they're really tangible actions, right? So for all of these tips, there are things you can do. So for example, one of the tips that we have is to cater to conversational search. Like the length of queries is getting much, much longer because people are speaking in full sentences to these conversational agents, right? So how do you create content that maps to that, right? And there are really specific things you can do. Like number one, your FAQs. And FAQs have been around for a while, but you do a good old fashioned FAQ now, but you put an FAQ for a specific degree program, for example, on that specific page, and it just really maps out the conversational content really well right next to the product info. And then another piece, and I love this stuff, is video as an innately conversational medium. If you just have, this right now, when you put this up on the internet, it's actually going to be supporting my presence with AI engines, and the things that I'm saying right now could be showing up in the future when people search for me, right? So doing video, doing podcast, things like that, it adds to that conversational search discoverability. So, they're not hacks, they're just things to do today. And then you understand what the AI value is behind it. And so you can explain it to your cohorts and your decision makers at the university and keep on going.
Well, and I think what's kind of interesting to me too is where like traditional SEO has been around for a while, and it could be very hard if there's, certain keywords that you're trying to go after. Like it could be like, okay, it's maybe like a non-starter. We can't even go there. It's like, it's too difficult. But I've even anecdotally seen that it's sometimes easier if you're really kind of optimizing for it, show up in the AI overview of like Google or whatever, like you can kind of like leapfrog low. So even to sometimes where there's like maybe kind of an equalizing here, I'm curious just if I'm like kind of speaking out of turn here, but like that idea that maybe like a smaller institutional player or whatever else like could have an opportunity to kind of show up, better than if they were kind of just going for like the traditional SEO kind of rankings or something. So like, have you seen those sort of dynamics playing out of kind of an equalizing of sort of like even smaller institutional players could be kind of presented more upfront, better than they could have otherwise?
Yeah, our SEOs say that is happening in specific ways. So Dan O'Leary at Overit, he was saying to me that an interesting thing is that terms that like secondary and tertiary follow-up terms within a series of conversations that somebody might have with a search engine, those are getting clicks to the site much more than they ever did. It used to be always about that first phrase that you'd use and what page do you get to, and then you'd abandon. But now, because the conversations are so long, as a conversation goes on, you might get to like deeper questions, more nuanced questions. And our clients are seeing traffic from those more nuanced questions to their site simply because you might not, as a keyword SEO person, you might not intuitively optimize for that, but it's kind of naturally happening. So that's a nice thing. And then I guess I'll say another thing that's really positive, where this could be a golden moment for SEO, which is while the top of funnel searches are incredibly competitive, and we're recommending to focus on middle of funnel and bottom of funnel queries, right? The fact is that those were always the most qualified leads anyways, right? So if you focus your energy on the middle of funnel about, what is the best X program in Y location, right? If you make sure you have content to meet that specificity where you really deserve to show up because it's relevant to your location and your offerings, then you're going to get almost all qualified leads. It might be 15 people instead of 250, but it's 15 people who really understand what you're offering and are really well qualified. So it's a funny piece because the conversions have so much more value, my SEOs are telling me, because you're throwing out a lot of the waste, because those folks stay on Google and they stay at 0-click search, right? So there's some really positive things about this as well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate just the refreshing kind of positivity with this kind of conversation here.
Positive, right? Yeah.
I think I've seen that, like, some people are being like, oh my God, is Google going to die because it's going to be 0-click search, whatever, like, and certain news publications that like depend on traffic, that people are searching for news or something, or like, there's been like some people who are very like doomsday about all this.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
things will definitely change. I think, I think we can all agree on that, but like that there can be areas of opportunity and this sort of like reinforcing of fundamentals and different things. Like,
we got to ride the wave, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to see where this goes and do with a positive attitude. And I think, if you are the change, instead of having the change kind of push you around in a year or 2 years, that's the right place to be right now.
Well, I think that is a beautiful piece of advice to end this episode on. It's always going to want to, wrap things up with like a good, like, kind of piece of advice. So I appreciate you sharing that and all that you did and all that you do to kind of, create these kind of teaching moments for, AI's impact on SEO and everything. So we'll have ways to connect with you and Overit. And I'm glad that you're like putting out, webinars and podcast content on this as well. So folks should definitely check that out and connect with you to keep the conversation going. And just thank you so much for hanging out and doing this.
Dustin, thanks so much. And thanks to the whole eduWeb posse for having this conference. Cheers.